Hey, thanks for tuning in. You're about to participate in a Bible study by Messiah Community Church. Welcome to Deepwater Wednesday. Feel free to add comments and to engage in the discussion. We'd love to hear what you have to say. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Deepwater Wednesday. It is going to be a very good study, I think, as we go forward. And I believe that we're going to hear a lot of good stuff from everyone. I believe that the message tonight is really going to be something that's going to be good. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to a lot of good discussion, and I'm looking forward to a lot of your input as well as we take a look at, in the beginning, an introduction to everything. An introduction to everything. It's good to be with you. I hope you like my graphics in the background. It's kind of interesting going out and looking for stuff and trying to put new things on the screen so that you can get an idea and we can have a little bit better stuff to take a look at. So we're going to get started tonight with, in the beginning, an introduction to all things, and by that I mean all things, because the book of Genesis really discusses everything that you could possibly want to know. Genesis covers from beginning to end the beginning of mankind, the first mention that we have of God, the origins of God, or the not origins of God, however you want to look at it, the origins of demons and the origin of the devil and all of his hordes that followed after him. It is actually every single thing that you could think of that had a beginning, including things like mechanization, creation of weapons, farming, herding sheep, cattle, all that sort of thing, as well as the beginning of families, the beginning of faith, the beginning of grace. All of it is found in the book of Genesis. You could say that the book of Genesis actually encompasses, and everything it gives, everything that we need to know about Christianity. If we just had that one book, we would have the entirety of Christianity and Judaism wrapped up into one thing. Now, on top of that, it parallels a lot, believe it or not, the last book of the Bible, the book of Revelation, because the book of Revelation also tells essentially the same story, but from a different angle, from beginning to end. Revelation is the revelation of Jesus Christ, or the revealing of Jesus Christ. The book of Genesis is actually the revealing of who God is. And so if we think with some open heads and open minds tonight, and as we start going through the books, or the chapters of the book of Genesis, I think you're going to find some really, really interesting stuff that you never knew before, and a whole lot different way of looking at things, and a solidification of your faith. So let's get started with some of our lessons tonight. We're going to go to Genesis chapter 1, verse number 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. Now, this is a pretty straightforward type of a statement, but I can tell you there are two ways to look at the book of this particular part of the book of Genesis. The first way would be to look at it and say that in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. This and the second verse, the earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters, is a disjunctive statement. And the rest of the chapter actually talks about the creation of God. So there's separation between the two. There's verses 1 and 2, and then all of the rest of the chapters of the book of Genesis. The other way to look at it would be to say that this is all one original act of creation. Now, I believe for the sake of our discussion, so that you get an understanding of where we're going to with this, we need to really break this down word by word so that you can grasp what God is doing here and kind of get an understanding where I'm coming from with this. In the beginning, and this is the Amplified Version, in the beginning, God prepared, formed, fashioned, and created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and an empty waste, and darkness was upon the face of the very great deep. The Spirit of God was moving, hovering, brooding over the face of the waters. Now, the Amplified kind of spreads this out a little bit and gives us a better understanding, but we want to pay particular attention now to in the beginning. In the beginning. Because we have always been taught this says in the beginning. However, in the original language, Hebrew language, there is no definite article here. So it isn't in the beginning, because in Hebrew you would have a different prefix that would be the definite article that would say it was the beginning. The Hebrews actually look at this as being a beginning. Now, most translations that I know of, NIV, King James, New King James, American Standard, they all use in the beginning. Now, understand that their intent, and maybe it's a good intent, is for us to understand that this is the beginning, rather than just a beginning. Somehow, a beginning would diminish the fact that God created it all. However, as we're going to see by the evidence presented here in the book of Genesis itself, that it's not really diminishing anything. In fact, this really gives us an understanding, much greater understanding of everything that God went through in order to create a perfect earth for his perfect creation. Science has theories of an old earth. We often get in conflict with science. I know today, as you know, we as Christians, we have a young earth theory for most of us. We all believe it's young earth, 6,000 or 7,000 years old, maybe at the most 10,000 years old, all based on biblical timelines. Somehow we have been taught, and it's been widely taught in most denominations, that the earth is a young earth, and at best it's 6,000 or 7,000 years old, and that's all based on the Bible timeline, and so, that's just the facts and all that. However, the hard thing that stands with that is that we then are left holding the bag for an argument with science, which comes out and says, oh no, we have all this data, carbon-14 dating and these rocks and moon rocks and meteorites and all this other stuff, and they all date back way billions of years ago. Well, it's an interesting thing because the Hebrews have no, in their rendering of it, have no conflict with science. They said, test whatever you want. This isn't about how old the materials are that made the earth. So the original Hebrew, being correct, would point to the materials present at the beginning to have already been in existence, just not ordered around, just not put into a structure. Which we can say to science then, hey, think whatever you want. Put a number on it. But we as mankind, in everything about us, we're only about 6,000 or 7,000 years old at best. Man doesn't go back billions of years. Man doesn't go back millions of years. Man goes back thousands of years. That evidence is pretty clear because of historical data that we have. And then we don't have to guess, and we don't have to fight. We can say, science, listen, you have your theories, that's okay. Now, here's the interesting thing that I found about that. and just kind of studying and looking at what we've come up with. Do you know that as many meteors and little asteroids and little things that have hit the Earth over the course of time, that we know time, and there's been numerous ones, there isn't any new material anywhere. We don't keep finding new materials. When we went to the moon, we really didn't find new materials. We found out the moon was pretty much made of stuff we already knew about. And that's the way it is all over the place. Now, there is one thing about this particular time in the beginning when God formed everything, and that is we don't need a conflict of our belief with science over this part of it. Now, we can conflict with science where it counts, and that's us. It's God. Because everything has to have an origin or a creation point. Everything. Every single thing that's ever been created has to have an origin. Our faith is not shaken over science, but our faith actually confirms science, while science doesn't have any ability to confirm our faith outside of faith. Science can try, but science cannot confirm the things that we know by faith. Now, you say, well, wait a minute. I thought there was Dead Sea Scrolls and da-da-da-da-da and different things that have dug up and that keep proving the Bible. There is. There's all kinds of stuff. Geology, the study of artifacts, all of those things, yeah, they do confirm scriptures. That is science. But I'm talking about getting down to when we're talking about how old is the earth. Science can't confirm the age of the earth outside of faith. One person that I talked to, and I was asking some questions about the age of the earth, and we were having a little discussion about it. And one of the things that I brought up was that, regardless of what we believe, regardless of what we've been taught, we know that in the rules of evidence, there has to be humankind that witnessed anything for it to be substantiated. Even in a court of law, if you have a bunch of, you might call them facts, but if there is no one that, if you had a gun in a murder case, but you had no one that saw the gun used, you didn't have anything other than the gun, and the bullet of the gun matched the bullet that was in the person that got killed, it would be hard to convict anybody just on the fact that you had a gun, a bullet, and a dead person. You would have to have someone who actually saw some of the events. And to be able to call that evidence is really good. That's the reason why circumstantial trials don't really go very, very well for the prosecution in most cases. And I mean, today, not a lot of people understand some of the law, so we do get some kinks in the system. But for the most part, unless there is some actual human involvement that said, I saw that, I saw this, it's very hard for us to nail that down and say this thing actually exists. We want to take a look so that we can be able to say exactly what we know. Hebrews 11:3 says, by faith we understand that the worlds during the successive ages were framed, fashioned, put in order, and equipped for their intended purpose by the word of God, so that what we see was not made of things which are visible. Now, this verse from Hebrews 11 gives us two thoughts at the same time. First, the worlds were placed in order for an intended purpose. Second, all things created were created from non-visible matter. You say, well, if it wasn't visible, then what was it? Well, the only thing possible was God's voice. That's the only thing possible, because it's the only thing that talks about anything being created. It is God who created the heavens and the earth. Do we know when that it was? No, we don't. But what we do know is it was his voice that set everything in order, because Hebrews tells us that. And there is no other explanation for it, especially when we come to the intelligent design of human beings. Not just the intelligent design of human beings, but the intelligent design of every single thing that is living upon the face of the earth. Now, he spoke matter into existence as physical matter. When he did that, I don't know. When did he put all the pieces out here that could be the sun, the moon, the stars? I don't know. What I do know is that he did it because it's here. And I have evidence it's here. We also have evidence from people over the course of time that the story is the same story. And I want to talk about that in just a little bit. In Hebrew, the beginning is a noun. All Hebrew words, though, come from a verb. The verb root is rosh, meaning to shake. Rosh Hashanah is the Hebrew New Year. It is a time when God looks at the works of his people and dictates their faith in the new year. The old is shaken, the new is ordered. So if we think about that the root word for beginning is rosh, then we have to understand that this is talking about something being shaken and then put in order. Rosh Hashanah is the Hebrew New Year. It's take a look at what my people have done for the last year. If it hasn't been good, I shake it up and then I order them into a new year. That's essentially what Rosh Hashanah is all about. Genesis 1:1-2. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. Now, the word beginning here is bereshith. Once again, like I said, it comes from Rush, which is to be shaken, but it means the first in time, place, order, or rank. Specifically, a first fruit, a principal thing, the chiefest thing. 53 times in the Old Testament, beginning is used, 18 times. The first is used 11 times. First fruits is used 11 times. Chief is 8 times. Now keep in mind that the thrust of Bereshith is to bring forth the meaning of first. Why would you do that? Well, if I'm going to shake something up, I'm going to then render it into an order with something being first. If you're following me so far. Let's take a look at the Hebrew word, and you can see it on the screen right here. I put my cursor around it, my mouse around it. This is the resh. This letter right here is resh, which is head or highest. Then aleph, strength, leader, or first. Then shin, which means consume, destroy, or to devour. Then there's a yod, which is the work or to work. The ta, which is this one right here, is a covenant or means to seal. What this would all spell out is the head strength consumes the work of the covenant. Beginnings are all about creating covenants. So if we can understand these first 2 verses of the book of Genesis, start us on a path to building a covenant. That's important for us to understand because God had a covenant first with Adam and Eve. The second use of the same Hebrew word is right here found in Genesis 10. This is the second time this word is used. Genesis 10, 8-10 says, Cush followed Nimrod. He was the first on earth to be a mighty man. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Therefore it is said, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord, the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, Erech, Akkad, and Calneh, in the land of Shinar. Now, Nimrod's kingdom was already in existence, or the people were there, the cities were there, the villages, or whatever these actually were. They were already in existence. He just ordered them from a chaos to a form. Take a look at Psalms 111 in verse number 10, where you find the same word, beginning, bereshith. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. All those who practice it have a good understanding. his praise endures forever. So the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Well, this is the same word used in Genesis 1:1 for beginning, and it's translated beginning. The fear of the Lord was already in existence. The fear wasn't created when someone became fearful of the Lord. The fear was always there, but the start of wisdom for a person is when they place fearing the Lord in the proper place of their life. Fear, by the way, is a place of respect. It is a prominent place of respect. So when somebody in Psalm 111:10 was actually saying is, when someone places the Lord in the proper place of respect, the proper place of honor, that is when wisdom begins in their life. Makes a whole lot of sense, doesn't it? I mean, if we don't have wisdom from someplace, we need to at least know that God is God. We're not. And that he is in charge as the creator of all things. He's in charge of all things. Bible readers have to assume that in some infinitely distant past, a primordial state existed. God brought the spatial matter, material matter of the earth, of the entities of the land, the deep, and the waters into existence. The text of Genesis doesn't narrate these events. You say, well, wait a minute. What about all this stuff? All this stuff that the first several, 7 days of creation, what were those? It's not, Genesis isn't the narrative for all of the stuff that was here. In fact, what it says is there was dry land, there was sea. That's what it is. And it's not at the time of in the beginning, it is the heavens and the earth, but there isn't dry land yet. There isn't seas yet. The material is here. All of the stuff is here. And we know it's here because it later on becomes dry earth and seas and sky and plants and all of those things. But it's not actually ordered into a usable place at this point in time. So Genesis doesn't narrate for us the creation of all the matter. Genesis narrates for us the ordering of all the matter. So Genesis sets in order the world as we know it in a historical or scientific context as far as there was man to give witness to its existence. The Bible is the most consistent, by far, the most consistent witness to creation. But outside the Bible, other cultures have historical records with creation accounts. Yet, exactly right. It does say, the Bible does say that everything, every single thing, every particle of every single thing was created by God. When was it created? We don't know. What we do know is that every single thing was created by God. We know specifically, and that's the point that I want to make sure I drive home tonight. We know specifically that the world as we know it, the world that we exist in, with the plants and the animals and everything else, we know specifically that that was ordered, arranged, put into a functional system by God. And I want to get to why that's important for us. Those witnesses, most often, all the witnesses, because we've got the Sumerian, that's S-U-M-E-R-I-A-N. So we've got the Sumerian witness, testimony. They have a creation account. We've got the Aborigine creation account. We've got the Egyptian creation account. There is a creation account for the Babylonians. There's all of these people, including the Chinese, have creation accounts. They have something that they refer back to that they say this was the beginning. Believe it or not, all of them have some structure of the earth came into existence in some way, formed by some God, some external creature to mankind. Some supernatural God formed one of those and then somehow created a man or brought forth a man or birthed a man. They all have different accounts, but they all follow kind of the same pattern as the book of Genesis. Genesis, however, is the only one that gives witness to the involvement of the Creator God. It is the only account of creation that calls upon a singular God that created everything. The Hebrew word for in is only represented by the letter bet in the beginning of Bereshit. The bet can mean in, but also when. Reshith is a word mostly used when talking about first. So in this context, it would be when first. The reason timing is important to us for our faith to stand on sure ground. We need to understand the timing. So when first, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was void and without form. Man's science cannot shake a sure foundation. Give us all the science you want. Bring all kinds of stuff. If I understand that there is a creator God that produced everything at the very beginning, you can show me anything you want, because all you're going to do is further solidify my faith. There is no need for Christians to have no explanation, thus no surety. Everything God did in Genesis was intentional for us. That's an important understanding to get. The book of Genesis was intentional for us. With the Hebrew language, everything is about context. In order to get the correct understanding of any word, we must know the context that word appears in. Genesis 1:1 gives us the context for the beginning. The word created is the Hebrew word bara. So we're putting the beginning with created. So we're going to get context to what happened in the beginning. The word bara means to fashion, order, create, or transform. It's not strictly indicative of something being created out of nothingness. The heavens is everything not earthly bound. The earth in Hebrew, eretz, meaning the whole of physical materials contained in the earth. This would include everything necessary for the earth to become functional. So all of the materials, for there to be water here, iron ore here, coal here, every mineral that you can think of, all of those things had to be there. In fact, the human body, if you've ever had a blood test done where they check all your different levels of everything, you will find out that in the human body, just about every single mineral that you can think of is in our body somewhere. You know, it's creating skin, bones, hair, so on and so forth. So we've got all of this stuff already here. Where did it come from? Well, it came from the earth. It came from all the contents. I mean, we were scooped up, and we're going to get to that in another lesson. We were scooped up from the dust of the earth. You ever try to put dust together? And God breathed into us the breath of life. Well, if he scooped us up from the dust of the earth, then we would have had to have contained in our being all the elements that are in the earth. Makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? Well, everything else here on the planet has to do with the earth being functional. All the other pieces. You see, we have to have water to live. We have to have soil that can be farmed for things to grow in order for us to live. Do you know that there's not another planet out there that we have found? I mean, we got a lot of speculations out in other galaxies, but we're the blue planet. We're the planet with the water. We're the planet with the sun. It's just the right temperatures, just the right environment to have life. We haven't found life anywhere else. We've been studying with telescopes, satellites, rockets, things that we sent off into space. We've been studying planets all over the place. We have not discovered life anywhere. And that's because God created the earth as a particular planet and then put everything around that intentionally, functionally, so that we would be the only place where life could exist. Now, I know there's some arguments about that. I know people will argue, but we haven't seen anything yet. We haven't seen any little green guys show up. I know there's people who argue Area 51. I can't watch another Area 51 video. Area 51. Well, has anybody actually ever seen any of that stuff? And what is it anyway? This created is the exact same word created in the book of Genesis, Genesis 1:27. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female, he created them. Clearly, man was constructed from the dust of the earth. He wasn't made from nothingness. He was made from materials that were already here. This is the same exact word created as in Genesis 1:1. Now, the purpose of Genesis 1:1 is not to tell us when God created the entirety of creation, but to reveal that which concerns us only, that which concerns his creation. Man, I wrestled with trying to understand this for a long time and finally got a hold of it. The Bible is not a history book of all of mankind. It is only a history of God's people. It doesn't include the history of every single tribe and nation, although every single tribe and nation will be included at the end, because it is the story of God's interaction with people who would choose him as God. And that is ultimately the story that is there. The bigger picture, or the bigger story that is there, is God's interaction with the man that he created. Why he created that man. How, not so much how he created it, although he gives us the how he created us, but the why he created us, for what purpose. And then if we look at, since man is the central figure of all things in Scripture, besides being God, or besides God being the central picture, because man is the other part of that equation, that relationship equation, we have to look and we have to say, okay, well, why then was everything else created? Well, the Scripture tells us everything was created for the man. So God creates an earth. He puts a man in it, but in the design of the man, he makes sure that every other single thing on the planet was here for the man to have pleasure with, to enjoy, to wonder at, always to see the glory of God. Now, his plan was to reveal purpose, not materialism. It's the reason why we have Genesis, the first couple chapters of Genesis in particular. The reason why we have them there is so that we understand the purpose of creation. So we understand this part is that God ordered out of chaos and structured his creation to thrive in the goal of the whole 7 days, which was man to have a garden, a perfect garden to exist in. I mean, think about that. Everything God did, he did on purpose for mankind. Every single thing. Hebrews 11:3 in the Amplified, it says it this way: by faith we understand that the worlds during the successive ages were framed, fashioned, put in order, and equipped for their intended purpose by the word of God, so that what we see was not made out of things which are visible. Now, Paul gives us insight here into this creation that the Amplified picks up on. In the context of our faith standing short, it's necessary and important for us to understand that Yahweh is the only one who has the power and authority to order everything into a functional existence for his purpose. Now, you say, well, why is that important for us to understand? Because we have all kinds of gods. It's just true. Men have created all kinds of gods. And at some point in time, I'm going to get into that part of it, how God, there's a like a sub-story that kind of goes through the entire Bible where God is proving over and over and over again that he is better than all the other gods that man chooses. And I'll get to the ultimate goal of what God was wanting from this whole experiment. The intent is for us to know we can place our faith in the Word of God. It's the intent for us knowing what happened in Genesis 1, 2, and 3 in particular, so that we can have faith in the Word of God. I can tell you, I've read some of the little transcripts of these ancient writings. I mean, they're old stuff, thousands of years old, of ancient gods. And it's kind of hysterical, comical to read some of these things because there's no way you could put your faith and trust in that. And when you lay them aside of the evolutionist who say that, evolution did this and the earth did that, well, it's pretty easy to stump all of that. You just have to keep saying, okay, well, who created that? Well, who created that? Well, who created that? Because they can't get there. You have to eventually get to God created it. God created. Even Stephen Hawking, before he passed away, came up with a few statements that really shocked a lot of people in the science realm because he said there was a singularity. Well, code word, singularity. There was a God. There was a God. And he was in charge. And in his single-minded purpose, he created all of this stuff. And that's why to understand the functional existence that God puts before us is very important for us because it's good for us to know, why are there animals here? Why are there plants here? Why is there water here? Why is it rain? Why does it... I mean, we got to understand all that because I tell you why we need to understand that. Right now, and I've been studying this for a couple years now, and putting together some writings on it, and that is Baal. Baal is an Old Testament god. Baal's all over the Old Testament. In recent years, they remade the Arch of Baal and brought it to the United States. You can look it up on YouTube and do a Google search for it, and you'll see pictures of the Arch of Baal. They actually brought it to New York. Then New York shipped it off to Washington. Well, there's a lot of reasons why that's troublesome, but Baal was essentially the weather god. He was the god of climate. They did all kinds of things, including cut themselves. I mean, look up the account of Elisha with the prophets of Baal, or Elijah with the prophets of Baal. They cut themselves, and they were saying, "Oh, Baal, make it rain, make it do this, make it that, come down and consume our sacrifice." Well, Baal never showed up. So what did God do? God consumed the sacrifice, and then God stopped it from raining for 3.5 years. Just stopped it. It's an amazing story. It really is. And when they wanted Baal to be in charge of the weather, the climate, a fake god, when they wanted a fake god to be in charge of the weather, God thwarted all of their efforts and just changed the whole thing. That's why we need to understand that, because as much as we like to think we're in some modern society, there are thousands of gods. Thousands. But there's only one real God. In the original Aramaic version, it says, "For by faith we understand that the worlds were fashioned by the word of God, and these things that are seen came into being out of those things which are unseen." Now, it's clear from the original Aramaic New Testament, is the one that Paul would have been writing in Aramaic when he wrote most of his letters, was intended us to have an understanding or a presumption that everything in its origin came from unseen things. Since we cannot see spoken words or commands, we must assume these are unseen things that created all matter. It doesn't matter what the state of the matter was in the beginning. No pun intended there. No other being has been able to place it in order to cause an infinite creation of life. Now think about that. God puts everything in order. And as he puts everything in order, he puts everything in order so that it infinitely continues to produce life. It is not possible that we know of, with all of our science, all of our laboratory tests, all of the in-house, modeling and all that on computers, it is not possible to grow life infinitely on its own on any other planet. Only here. And it's amazing how this whole thing was set up into an order so that it works. And God is still involved in all of it. That's what the amazing thing is. Genesis 1:2, and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. Now this verse gives us further understanding of the creation account. That is a very, very good point. And I meant to put something in there because I ran across an article about that, about DNA. It is a very ordered structure. Our DNA is a very ordered structure. That's the reason why they can track it. That's the reason why they can, they can do these models of DNA, because it is a very ordered structure of 4 amino acids. And those amino acids formed together, they give us every single part of our being, and all of the animals, and all of the plant life. Everything that is living has DNA. And that DNA has a very specific structure. It is errors in that structure that create things like sicknesses, diseases, birth defects, all of those things. It is things like, why is one person's hair blonde or one person's hair brown? It's all contained in the DNA code. The code is a very ordered thing, and they're experimenting right now with how to go in, find places where the DNA is messed up, and repair those places with babies in the womb. Now, I don't know how far they've gotten, but I read about those things happening, and even talked to a doctor one time when I was on a plane who was working at the University of Cincinnati Children's Hospital, or at Children's Hospital Cincinnati. And he was from another country, but he was coming here specifically to do repairs in the womb of babies who had certain birth defects in the womb that they could fix before the baby ever got outside of the womb. And he was telling us about how they're finding these things in the DNA that they're believing they can actually restructure. It's amazing stuff. Well, who created that? Who put that together? This verse gives us further understanding of the creation account as being that of placing everything in a functional order for God's eventual placement of his perfect man in a perfect place of existence. Now, this gives us the state of the earth at that time. That's all it's given us. It was without form and void. Hebrew, tohu va bohu. This phrase is used several times in the Old Testament and means chaotic or disorganized. When it says void and without form, it doesn't mean it was non-existent or it wasn't there. It was all there. All the materials were there. Every single thing was there. It just was disorganized and chaotic. Literally, the word means a total mess. Sounds like some of our kids' and grandkids' bedrooms, right? A total mess, disorganized, chaotic. You can find, I gave you a couple reference verses there for that. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was covering the face of the deep. The Spirit of God, or the breath of God, hovers over the chaos. Darkness, which is always representative of unknown, In scriptures, darkness is unknown. Whenever you see the word darkness, darkness came across land, because it's unknown. You can't see, like that proverbial cave where you can't see your hand in front of your face. So what is it? What's the fear there? Well, I don't know what's in front of me. I don't know what's around me, right? So when we see this darkness, that darkness was over the face of the deep. We're talking about it was unknown. This unknown was death, destruction, ignorance, sorrow, wickedness. All this unknown stuff is over the face of everything. God is always about knowing in light. God is not about keeping us in unknown. In fact, Paul says several times, even when he's praying for the Ephesian church, he says, I pray that the eyes of your understanding would be enlightened. There's a reason why he uses enlightened, because he wants us to have light on all the matter, all the subject matter of why he created this entire earth. His desire for us is to dwell in light. That's why in heaven, according to the book of Revelation, there's no more darkness or night. There is no more. Kind of like living in Alaska during the summer. There's no darkness. There's just continual light. And so if we take a look here, whoops, let me go back. If we take a look here, in Exodus 39 and 40, God sets in order the elements of the tabernacle. In John sets in order the revelation of Jesus Christ. Luke, he sets in order the structure of the church in the book of Acts. In Exodus, when God is laying out the things of the tabernacle, he is very specific. He's very specific about what he lays out in order. God is a very structured God. God's not a God of chaos. God is not the author of confusion, right? But he is the God of order. Now, whenever Israel was out of order, when they got majorly out of order, and they started crying out to him, God gave them the law. Why did he give them the law? To structure them further. To structure them. They wanted to know, what would it take us and to please you? What would it take us? How could we gain your favor? God said, hey, look, I just want to give you a favor. I love you. I want you to be my people. And they said, no, you got to tell us what to do. What do we have to do? God said, you want some order to this thing? Okay, I'm the God of order. Gave them the law. 600 and something laws later, they couldn't follow them. When we were yet without strength, without order, without structure, God gave us his Son. That's the entire message of the Scriptures. God taking things that are out of order, placing them in order, so that he can have relationship with those people, with those souls. That's why we run into verses like that. Jesus is the light of the world. And it says in the book of Revelation that we have no more need for the sun or the moon. But Jesus is the light. Now, next week we're going to get into that God said, let there be light. And when we get into that, we're going to start putting some bones on this thing as far as the structure of the earth. Because it's interesting that God creates the first day light, but he doesn't create the sun the first day. That's interesting. Well, wait a minute. We thought the sun was light. Is it? Is it really? Or is light something else? You see why it's important? Listen, we've got an argument to have with the people on planet Earth. Because right now there is a lot of argument about everything around us. And, I've said this, I've said this a number of times, that we live in a day and age where there are gods of this world. There are, just like in these ancient days, man created gods to help man put things in order without God. So they created all these gods. Some of those gods are actual real beings. Some of them are not. Some of them are pieces of wood. Some of them are clay pots. Some of them are men. They put them together. We have put them together out of our desire to have something, or some person give us some structure or some order for some need in our life. God, from the beginning, that was his entire plan, was to put something in order or to lay out a structure for his man to be in so that his man had every single possibility of being a success. That's the reason why he gave us light the first day. And we're going to get into that next week. Along with, we're going to probably cover the first and second days because it's kind of interesting. Maybe the third day. It depends on how quickly we get moving along. One of the things that I just saw in here that is we need to understand as we put this together, everything that God does, he does intentionally. And I did read this article just because I saw a rainbow. Betty and I took a little trip, just a little day trip running around doing some running in the rain the other day. And on our way back, the sun was out, but it had been raining. And there was this beautiful, beautiful rainbow up in the sky. And I was thinking, God is still reminding us of his miracles. He's still reminding us of his love. He is still reminding us of his promises, never to flood the earth again and destroy mankind. And so I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, man, that is just absolutely beautiful. I seriously had not seen one with so many pronounced colors, and they were in perfect order. And I told Betty, I said, if we go to the other side of this rainbow, which you can't do, by the way, but if you were looking at this rainbow from the other side, it would be in the exact same order. And I remember reading something about rainbows some years ago, and the rainbows are in the order of the colors, are in a frequency, a light frequency. Light is sound, I guess you could say, traveling in extreme fast speeds. So, but all of the colors of the rainbow are different frequencies, and they are a very structured order. And they are always the same. If you had seen a rainbow or a picture of a rainbow from 1900, it would be the same colors as the rainbow today. If you saw it back in the days of Noah, it would be the same colors as today. It is highly improbable that those color sequences would ever change. They wouldn't be different any other place you went. What is the likeliness that could just happen randomly? And I know there's scientific reasons why a rainbow appears and, so on and so forth. I understand that. I understand we have studied why rainbows become rainbows. But the truth is, we don't really, we know what they are. What we can't really grasp on is why they're there. Well, it just happens. This phenomena when it rains and there's certain these conditions and da. Okay, well, why don't they exist at other times? Why do they only when it's a rain? That's why they're called rainbows. Or when water's up in the air and it's steam, like it's refraction. Yeah, it's refracted by frequency, right? And it's the water that refracts it. Well, we understand that. We understand the scientific part of it, but it still doesn't explain why it would be the exact same order every single time, and it would always be a reminder to mankind that God still loves us and has no plans to wipe us out. Well, I hope you got a little bit out of this tonight. We're going to ask you to do all of these things, up and down, and help us make our YouTube channel something that people jump on and watch, get a little education from. Because I believe that God is going to, in the midst of educating his people about who he is and about why we exist, he's going to grow our faith, because that's really what we need. We need to stop being fooled by all the gods of this world who claim all kinds of things. Until next week, have a great rest of your week. Be blessed in the mighty name of the Lord Jesus.
To support the ministry, go to messiahcommunity.org and click the donate button. Thank you.